When we read ancient texts, it is easy to get caught up in the surface of history, the movements of empires. But stripping away that layer reveals a structural bedrock of theology driving the narrative. Academic consensus frequently treats chapters 40 through 55 of Isaiah as a single, unified block. The standard interpretation suggests this entire section focuses on one goal: God delivering the Jewish people from their physical exile. In the first half of this block, the text supports that view. Babylon is the physical oppressor, and the narrative centers on captivity. However, a structural shift occurs after chapter 48. Through the first segment, references to Babylon and its gods are constant. In chapter 49, the word Babylon vanishes. The physical empire is never mentioned again. This creates a discrepancy in the narrative. The language of deliverance and rescue continues through chapter 55, but the target of that deliverance has changed. If the physical exile is no longer the focus, we have to ask what requires saving. The text indicates that returning to the land is insufficient. Escaping Babylon geographically does nothing to cure the underlying disease that triggered the exile. The cause of the exile was Israel's persistent rebellion, which resulted in a spiritual alienation from God. Because God operates a universe of cause and effect, he cannot ignore this rebellion. The penalty was earned, and it cannot be suspended simply because the people have left Babylonian territory. Chapter 49 initiates a change in the narrative focus, moving away from political captivity to address the more difficult problem of spiritual captivity. Resolving this alienation requires a new mechanism for salvation. The nation of Israel cannot provide this for itself. As the text previously established, the nation itself is the entity in need of rescue. To bridge this gap, the text introduces a proxy, a servant who can execute the deliverance that the bankrupt nation cannot. We can identify this proxy by tracing this servant throughout these chapters. In the first half, chapters 41 to 48, the servant is the historical nation of Israel. The profile of this national servant is one of failure. The scroll describes Israel as deaf, blind, and trapped. But a contradiction emerges in chapter 49. A new figure appears, also called Israel, whose profile is the exact opposite. The split-screen analysis reveals a logical paradox. On one side, we have the historical nation, trapped in darkness. On the other, this new servant is commissioned by God to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring the preserved of Israel back to Yahweh. This raises a structural problem. How can a blind, imprisoned nation be the entity that rescues that same blind, imprisoned nation? The text solves this by identifying the chapter 49 servant as the ideal Israel. This is a messianic figure who fulfills the obedience that the historical nation failed to achieve. Chapter 50 addresses the legal state of the exiled Judeans, who believe their covenant with God has been permanently severed. The exiles accuse God of legally divorcing them or selling them to creditors to pay his own debts. God's response is a legal challenge. He demands the exiles produce a certificate of divorce or identify the creditors. Since neither exists, the bond remains. The exile was not an abandonment, but a chosen penalty for iniquity. The alienation was a legal consequence of their own actions. Because God chose to enact this penalty, he retains the authority to reverse it. This makes the role of the ideal servant specifically legal. He functions as a substitute possessing the authority to satisfy the debt of the nation's rebellion. The third speech of the ideal servant in chapter 50 defines the method of this redemption. In contrast to the deaf nation, this servant has an ear to hear. He is determined to obey God's word regardless of the cost. This obedience leads to physical abuse. The servant willingly gives his back to those who strike him and his cheeks to those who pull out the beard. The suffering is unjust and unearned, yet the servant remains confident in his vindication, knowing that God will help him and no one can declare him guilty. This voluntary suffering serves as the mechanism to legally reverse the nation's alienation. He absorbs the penalty that the nation earned. We can determine the servant's identity relative to God by looking at the poetic structure of chapter 50, verse 10. Hebrew poetry uses synonymous parallelism, where two lines state the same truth. Here, fearing the Lord is paired directly with obeying the voice of his servant. This structure establishes a functional equivalence. Obeying the servant is theologically equal to fearing the Lord himself. The servant carries the full, indivisible authority of Yahweh. This authority is applied in chapter 51 through the metaphor of the cup of staggering. Jerusalem is described as having drunk the cup of God's wrath. The cup represents the unavoidable consequences of the nation's rebellion. God promises to remove this cup. On a legal ledger, it's a debt in the nation's column. Justice requires it be consumed. The ideal servant steps into the gap, drinks the cup to the dregs, and balances the ledger. This Old Testament framework provides the vocabulary for the New Testament, specifically when Jesus asks in Gethsemane if this cup might pass from him. In chapter 49, verse 6, God declares it is too small a thing for the servant only to restore Israel. He is also to be a light for the nations. By shifting the focus from a local empire to a spiritual debt, Isaiah establishes a mechanism of redemption intended to reach the ends of the earth.